Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest version of my presentation. This is a version of what I gave last week in New York, but unfortunately they won't let me have a copy of what I gave, even though they filmed it. So I'm going to do this to camera now, and then the idea is that we're going to work with animators and um, designers to do a YouTube presentation of this and sort of make it as visually interesting as possible. But here's the source material. So I'm from Right Angles, and the title of the presentation is Blind Spots, Threat to Your Reputation and Legacy. Bit about me, I'm involved in reputation management. That's not laundering. There is a difference. Reputation laundering is where you've got bad people and you're trying to hide something. With this, it's reputation management, it's reputation repair. So it's innocent people that have been unfairly accused. I've been doing this for well over 20 miserable years. I've got clients all around the world. A lot of what we used to do over the years was legacy building, helping establish that, that legacy in terms of foundations and recognition for what people have done toward the end of their career with their family offices and so on. A growing part of what we do is now reputation protection. It started as 10% sort of 5 years ago. Now it's at least half of what we do, and it's growing all the time to the point where we're going to rebrand as Reputation ER and offer an exclusive service for weaponized reputational ruin and give people a defense to that. There's my contact details. I'll put that up at the end. So, just a note on client examples. Where named, I have their permission to say them, and case studies have been anonymized. If I don't name someone, then I will have then changed certain things that won't make them identifiable. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about the problem, common mistakes that people make, best practice, the upside of facing a reputational attack, and key lessons and questions along the way. So, let's start with the problem then. Reputations are now built on sand. One allegation can ruin a lifetimes of hard work, and being innocent just isn't enough. People, brands, companies are at risk from this weaponized reputational attack. This is not about protecting wrongdoers. If you are doing bad things, then people should face the consequences of those behavior. This is something completely separate, where people are subject to a deliberate attack to ruin their reputation, often at the behest of a blackmailer or an aggrieved person. So what's changed? Well, first of all, the internet has made it easy for people not just to publicize false or exaggerated allegations, but also to mobilize the mob, is to harness an army of often hundreds of people, or sometimes innocent people that have been co-opted into the campaign to get on board and create this sense of momentum, the eye-catching campaign to ruin your reputation. And the media cover these things because they're desperate for clicks. The more unusual that you can make or more lurid an allegation, the more likely a mainstream media is going to cover it. And then, of course, that then creates a vicious circle in this case where traditional media is covering this social media campaign, legitimizing each other, feeding off each other, and a frenzy can begin. But it's worse than that. It's not just that the internet has made it easy to both raise awareness and mobilize, it's that the power balance has flipped in society. Allegations made online now are enough to actually generate a story, and pride is taken by millions of people in automatically believing the victim. They want to believe the underdog. Being under investigation is the same as guilt now, and it's flipped because in the old days, if you had wealth and power, you could hire lawyers, you could try and make it go away, all of those kind of things. Whereas now, your accusers have got nothing to lose, and you have their reputation is nothing. But lots of people will automatically believe that, oh, that person is rich and powerful, so therefore they clearly did it. You've got something to lose, and these people know that if they accuse you of being racist or sexist or doing something inappropriate, then actually companies and high net worth individuals are often tempted to settle just to make the thing go away, even though they really don't want to do that. I want to introduce you to a new concept called the anti-fan. Now, an anti-fan is an aggrieved principal, often leading a small group. They could be a former employee, it could be a conspiracy theorist, it's often a former employee or an ex-partner, either business partner or some kind of romantic partner. It could be a stalker, but they've got nothing to lose, as I say. It's someone who's really angry at you for whatever reason, often unfairly. You might have done something slightly wrong, and then they've they've taken it to, the infinite point. But it's often someone with an axe to grind that thinks, right, we're going to ruin this person's reputation. And they set out to do that industriously and in a very strategic and very sort of thought through campaign. It could also be, as you'll see in a second, a runner up in a contest. And the key thing that all of these have got running through them, as it were, is their desire to sort of see justice done. And they're called anti-fans because, in the same way that you would have a fan for, like an actor or a musician, and they have all that dedication and they spend so much time, adoring them and sort of chatting to people, and sort of it takes up a lot of their attention. The anti-fan is the evil twin of that, where they take all of that enthusiasm, and all of that dedication, all of that time, to then sort of bring you down, and they're convincing themselves that you're corrupt or a fraud or whatever it might be. Here's another phrase to introduce you to: the phrase of what's called noble cause corruption, which is that they believe that they're doing God's work, as it were, maybe figuratively as well as literally. They think that right is on their side, that you do need to be exposed as this fraud or this wrongdoer. And that then causes them to do things that are morally wrong, untrue, and so on. But they believe they're doing it in the service of a noble cause. I've had friends and family of people that have been sacked rightly for dishonesty. That person can't come home to their family and say they've found me stealing, so they have to invent something about sort of workplace bullying or whatever, and then the family believe them and they say, right, well, we'll bring them down and register hundreds of sort of Glassdoor negative reviews, Trustpilot, TikTok, all of these kind of things where it's beyond the reach of traditional lawyers, and they value anonymity. Couple that with the fact that people believe these people anyway, and you have this months-long campaign to sort of bring someone down. And then it doesn't become about whether you're innocent and guilty of that. It's about the actual campaign. The spectacle of these accusations is the very thing that attracts the attention, not whether they're true or not. That doesn't really matter often if they get this, if your enemies or newfound enemies can get this right. I also want to introduce you to this concept of what's called offence archaeology. Now, that's where someone goes deliberately digging for offensive things that you might have said. And social media makes it so easy to do that now. You can search your name and then a list of 30 inflammatory words or topics and so on. And then eventually they'll happen upon, maybe you got into an argument with someone on Twitter 12 years ago after a couple of glasses of wine, and it might have escalated or whatever, but that often happens. And you'll see that I'm sure you've seen on the news, or read in the newspaper, that a story will start about a celebrity that's either getting cancelled or someone fired from the Oscars or whatever it might be. And I love this. It says historic tweets have emerged, as if they've emerged like a plant from the soil, like they just sort of emerged into the world from historic times. And of course they haven't. This is the thing about a weaponized reputational attack. Someone has gone deliberately digging for that information to then do something about it, so that it's injurious, so that it can harm you. And one of the things that fascinates me now about coverage of these kind of things, when it says, these things, offensive tweets have emerged, is people don't say, well, who's behind this? Why are they doing it? They don't seem to get that. It's more about the spectacle of celebrity under fire. Here's a real life example. There's Alexi McCammond. She applied for the job and won the role of Teen Vogue in 2021. But and a new phrase for you here, pre-resigned. So before she could even start the job, the runner-up, the person that she beat, did some offence archaeology, went digging, found some, frankly, injudicious, not particularly nice tweets, but they weren't hate-filled or anything like that, in my view. They were embarrassing, of course, certainly. And they weren't public. They weren't there for everyone to see. They were a reply. She got into an argument with someone. But the point is, they were a decade ago. And they, of course, emerged. I love that use of the passive voice there. They emerged. But they weren't just sort of screenshotted and then sent round a few people. They were screenshotted and then added to a petition on one of the main petition sites. And then that was circulated to all of the staff at Condé Nast to say, here are some offensive things that this person said years ago. Do you feel comfortable with someone who's saying that? And of course, they weren't just invited to look at them. They were invited to look and then sign something, so that person could then go to the board of Condé Nast saying, look at all of these people that have signed. So she got colleagues and so on to sign it, but she also then got advertisers. Here's some offensive things that were said. Did the advertisers stand by? Well, of course they don't want to be seen to be endorsing that. So several advertisers signed the petition as well, meant she was toast. So someone that she beat fair and square did some fence archaeology, and then it was presented to the board of, here's not just some terrible things, but here's loads of staff and advertisers, again, all deliberately created. And of course, boards do what boards do all the time now, which is they take the coward's way out and they just run away from this, and they want to appear strong and decisive, and they're wanting to tap into this woke agenda of always believing the underdog. I want to believe what the evidence suggests. I want, if someone makes an evidential claim, I want it to be true. I don't care who's right and wrong from a point of view of historic wrongs or believing a certain cohort of people. The only litmus test for me is whether these things are true. And the minute you automatically believe anyone, we're going to get into serious problems. And that's where we have the problem now. Is it's the allegation enough? Is enough to make people run away from this kind of thing and harming careers? As I say, we want people to face the consequences of their wrongdoing, but this is not that. We also want innocent people to live their lives in peace and harmony and enjoy themselves. But this is a weird and growing grey area where the stain of an accusation is enough to finish people if it's sufficiently well put in terms of the mobilization, the way that it's gone about this. You can do this incredibly well and ruin someone's life over something that's not true. Here's another example. Neil Blair is a literary agent. And you won't know Neil, but you will know Joanne Rowling, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter franchise. He signed an open letter to Harper's Magazine that, along with 153 other very notable people, it was expressing the outrage at the current vogue for public shaming and ostracism. It defended free speech, it advocated for non-violence, and it asked for a calm and respectful discussion of our differences. I mean, obviously, this guy deserves to be, completely hung out to dry and have his life ruined for arguing for non-violence and respectful discussion. I mean, you can see this. Of course, the campaign to cancel his whole firm began immediately. Now, this is not about J.K. Rowling's views on transgender people, for or against. In fact, that was the crime that they accused him of, was failing to condemn his client. So this gentleman owns an agency that represents dozens of authors, and he doesn't get involved in defending or promoting the political views of any of them. And one of his clients has a view on transgender people. His crime was to just do nothing and say and not get involved. But of course, there was a mobilized campaign immediately to contact not just him, but all of his other clients. So all of the other authors that his firm represented came under huge pressure online to fire him for the crime of representing another writer. There you can see there's some coverage there. All authors quit J.K. Rowling agency over transgender rights. It nearly ruined his business and ruined his life. And again, he hadn't even done anything wrong. And that's the key message for my presentation today, is that it could happen to you. Everyone thinks that this kind of weaponized reputational attack is the kind of thing that would happen to other people. It doesn't. It's growing all the time. It's a big source of our business, and people just aren't prepared for it in any way. And frankly, you're taking that for granted. That your good reputation is, to state the obvious, the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's not just people, chief executives, doctors, surgeons, and so on. It's also groups. It could be family offices, companies, charities, and so on. Everyone is at risk from this type of allegation, because you don't want to get into the position where you're having to defend wrongdoing, innocent or guilty. It's a terrible discussion to have. And it's very binary. There's no proportion or mitigation. If you get involved in a bar fight and you go to court, the judge is going to consider, well, how many times did you punch the guy? Did you smash a bottle? There's going to be some consideration of the severity of the offence. There's not just like innocent, guilty, death penalty or other. There's an element of mitigation and proportionality and all of these kind of things. None of that is taken into consideration now with cancel culture. You're innocent and you must be cancelled. That's it. It's such a draconian test in both there's presumed guilt and then you've got to be hung out to dry, that you have to arm yourself and deal with this. And it could happen because of blind spots. It's old human nature type thing, betrayal, denial. And that denial can be coming from a point of view of arrogance, I'm too powerful, or naivety, they don't understand how the media works. Misplaced faith. It could be that one of your relatives or a colleague that you never thought would get into trouble might have a secret gambling addiction and might have got involved in all manner of things. There's honestly held but mistaken beliefs, loyalty, skeletons in the closet. We'll talk about that. But you'd be surprised how people will say, well, I've had 20 years of this thing that happened to me 20 years ago, never happened. coming out, and you know, you can assume it won't come out. But of course, often behind these types of campaigns is someone who's betrayed you, who knows about that thing, and you never thought for 1 second that you would fall out with that person. Then they're going to use that against you, and they're not just going to publicize it, they're going to call for an investigation or get a petition or anything. That's the point that I was trying to say. I had a client whose son went out drunk one night in their family Ferrari and lost control of the vehicle and killed a woman and her 2 children. Like, I was asked to spell check the statement a couple of days later, and it just said that it led with, you know, I love my son very much and he's a nice guy. It didn't even lead on expressing sympathy for the woman who died and her children. I mean, you'd be surprised. Again, I can imagine that gentleman wanted to say he was a good father and he loves his son, who was clearly needs to be held accountable for what he did, but also was presumably didn't set out to do it, and you know, at least deserves some help to get back on his feet as well as to be punished. But again, none of that happened, of course, and it just makes it worse. So that's the thing. So having hopefully convinced that this is something that you ought to think about, that it could happen to you, then what happens is, because people aren't prepared and they're blindsided by this, they make it worse. The common mistakes are lack of preparedness, not knowing your enemy, making it worse and looking guilty. You can be so upset about these things that you can behave in a way that someone mischievously can paint as guilt. They can say, well, you know, look, he's looking a bit shifty. You might just be genuinely upset, lost for words. If you do too much and deny too strongly, people can say, you know, he doth protest too much. Or if you think I'll just ignore it, or you lightly deny it and sort of, that could be accused of or framed mischievously as you not taking these allegations seriously, or maybe that they're true. So again, you've got to be careful here, because whatever you do or don't do is going to be spun in a way that is going to be is you know you is going to be used against you. Lack of preparedness is an issue as well in terms of making a decision. I'm often asked by companies, you know, a senior manager will be accused of wrongdoing, and what are we doing about it? The media want a response. Are we? But we don't even know in terms of first principles what's happening. Are we firing this guy? Are we going to stand by him? Is he a victim of blackmail? Does he need to go on a retreat and dry out? What is it? Like, what are we doing? And the three people in a big corporation that can actually decide in principle, from first principle, what are you doing? You know, one could be on retreat in Sri Lanka, one could be at a funeral, and the other one can be in the air. So like I don't even know what to tell the media, because I don't know whether we're firing this guy or whether it's not true or whatever. That can be a problem, because again, the tail is wagging the dog. So lack of preparedness, let's talk about that then. You've got to look at like what could happen, not just um, whether it's likely or whether you want it to happen, but like if you make canoes, then it's reasonably foreseeable that someone might die in one of your canoes. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a fault with the canoe design. But again, these are the kind of things that are reasonably foreseeable. And again, who's going to make this how to handle decision? It's not just what you're going to do, it's how to handle it in terms of what tone, what temperament, you know, how it's going to be communicated, all of that. People don't even give any thought to that. So you need to think about that. Because if you don't, you're going to make it worse. People don't put any of the thought into that. They do a knee-jerk response, or worse, they hope it goes away. I've had clients that just think, look, if we don't communicate with the media about this fictional executive that's in trouble, then you know, it'll go away. But of course, it doesn't. It makes it worse. They'll say, well, the company has 7 options available to it, and the article could be 3 or 4 pages long, because they can now explore all of those options, weighing up the good and the bad of all of those. Whereas if we just said to them, look, we're going to choose option A, then it's a much shorter, less damaging article, because yes, there's an article, but it's only weighing up the pros and the cons of the one option that you are going to take, and doesn't have to sort of expand into all of the other topics. But you've got to acknowledge that it's happening, and that it's an opportunity to embrace it and show that you take it seriously. So the decision to decide whether to engage with false allegations is something that there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides, and you need to do the right thing for the right reasons. So sometimes I'll advise a client to ignore it and say nothing. Other times I'll say you should engage with it. But what the factors that figure into that decision we're going to talk about now, because it's incredibly important. There is no right answer. So let's take the first option then. We're innocent. This is a false allegation. Let's defend ourselves. Well, a denial can work. If you've been accused of wrongdoing, then I'm completely innocent, governor. absolutely no problem at all. But the denial can create the story too. It then becomes the battle to clear your name. Again, it's not just about the court of public opinion has got a mischief maker here that's rustling up this story, making it worse, and we've got to take account of that our response is going to be mischievously spun. Here's an example of a sneaky journalist trick. There's a knock at your front door one Sunday morning, and it's a journalist from a newspaper. You open the door, you're a bit tired, you haven't had your coffee yet, and the journalist simply says to you, Bob, have you cheated on your wife? And you go, no, like that's incredibly rude. You're annoyed that this person has doorstepped you, and of course, they can then lead on. I'll just move that, forgive me. Man denies cheating on wife. So there you are. There you are, doorstepped. Now, it's they can't print that you cheated on your wife because then you could sue them. But they can factually report as true the fact that you denied cheating on your wife, that you did deny it. But of course, anyone denying that they did anything, I don't know about you, but if I read that someone's denied doing something, I think, well, they must have done it if they've denied it. And that's a sneaky journalist trick. Here's another one that builds momentum, is asking the great and the good, people in your orbit, to comment on it. Now, that could be the chair of your board, it could be an investor, a regulator. They're going to knock on that person's door as well and say, do you stand by this particular person who's accused of whatever? Now, any sensible board chair is not going to comment. They're not going to sort of react immediately to a dossier. I'm sure he did it. I'm sure he didn't. No one would do that. But again, that can be mischievously spun as the board fails to support Bob, because Bob has been facing this accusation, and now the chairman of the board of his company was given the opportunity to rebut these allegations and failed to do so. So now it feels like there's some momentum building up here. Not only you stand accused of something, but the board have declined an opportunity to support you. Again, luckily, these are fictional allegations and fictional momentum, and luckily Bob himself is fictional. But you can see the point. It's very easy to create a fake sense of momentum and legitimacy. Another thing to tell you about is the Streisand effect, which is named after Barbara Streisand. Now, the litmus test of whether anything's a thing in society is whether it has a Wikipedia page, and as you can see, it does. And the Streisand effect is a very real psychological, media, and cultural phenomenon now that's growing all the time. It's taught in various colleges and so on. And it is the unintended consequence of attempts to hide, remove, or censor information, where that effort backfires and instead increases the awareness of it. So it's doing the opposite, if you want. The attempts to silence the the effect is the very thing that makes it big. And it's because it's named after a very real case of what happened to Barbara Streisand. A noble project was for a photographer, Kenneth Adelman, was trying to document coastal erosion in California. And he was trying to sort of let policymakers and government know that California is in trouble. There's serious coastal erosion problems. And he was a photographer, and he came up with the idea of taking 12,000 photos of the entire coastline of California on one website so that they could see for themselves. The coastline of California is public property, so he was legally allowed to do that. And as I say, it was about sort of getting government to do something about coastal erosion. All great so far. And of those 12,000 pictures, one person had a problem with image 3850, which is that. And I'm sure you can guess why. That's Barbara Streisand's beautiful Malibu beachfront property. It didn't say that it was Barbara Streisand's house. That's just one of the pictures. But of course, her lawyers must have seen it somehow, and they considered it to be a breach of privacy. She sued, or her lawyers sued them for violation of privacy, and it was quickly dismissed. She had to pay his legal costs, and it didn't look great. The case wasn't great. The point is the unintended consequences of trying to silence it. This is why the Streisand effect is named after Barbara Streisand, because before the lawsuit, there was just 6 views of that picture. Literally, just 6 people had seen that picture before the lawsuit took place. And as a direct result of all of the publicity that that lawsuit generated, after the lawsuit, 420,000 people looked at that page on that website within 10 days alone, and hundreds of other articles reproduced the picture, Daily Mail, loads of newspapers. So ultimately, millions of eyeballs saw that. So in order to stop another 6 people seeing it, millions of people now know where she lives and all what her house looks like. It's not just a media phenomenon, it's also a psychological phenomenon. It's called psychological reactance. And it's that once people are being made aware that information's kept from them, they they're significantly more motivated to acquire and spread it. It's like hidden knowledge. This is what people don't want you to know. It's why the BBC don't ban records now, for example, because one of the earliest records I ever bought was a song called Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And I bought it because the BBC had banned it. You want that hidden fruit, hidden knowledge, as it were, forbidden fruit. And of course, the Chinese have a proverb going back to 4th century BC. I won't say I won't pronounce the Chinese, but the translation is wishing to cover, more conspicuous. So the act of trying to suppress something can be in itself can make it a lot worse, and also can be framed as you trying to hide the truth, even though there might be legitimate reasons for you to want to get lawyers on to try and to bury this or to stop it from coming out. You've got to be careful of the optics of that, because a lawyer rightly will do what a lawyer needs to do, but this is the court of public opinion, and the lawyers are not in control of that. So I wouldn't necessarily ask a lawyer to whether this is going to be effective in the court of public opinion. I would take an in principle decision at board level whether to go legal first, not just to go legal automatically, because that can make it worse. And it also gets worse because the rise of citizen journalists. There's this. We've already talked about the righteous anti-fans, but the rise of citizen journalists. They've got no journalism training, no formal editorial complaints mechanism. I actually like it when my clients are accused of something by the Wall Street Journal or USA Today or the Financial Times, because they've got editorial managers and codes of conduct about what their journalists can and can't do. There's a general counsel. There's someone and some mechanism that I can try to reason with that particular media brand, and try and get them to do the right thing, or at least argue with it. But with citizen journalists, they've it's the Wild West. And they don't even have a duty to correct misinformation. We've had trouble here in the United Kingdom of people filming jurors as they go to sort of people accused of like rape and murder and so on. And then the trial has to be abandoned. And, they go to prison. And as they're being arrested, these citizen journalists say, well, I didn't know I couldn't talk to a juror. Well, they ought to have known. But the problem is these people have also got 30 million followers. So it is something that our clients are increasingly facing. They can do things like organize actors and extras to sort of create fake demonstrations with wielding placards and all things like that. And again, very good for spectacle. No one asks them, why are you here? If it's a group of people who are sort of marching with placards, and often they can be paid. There are companies that can organize this. So, okay, we've tried suppressing the information. Let's do the opposite then. Let's just ignore it. Let's just do nothing. Because then, if we're trying to get rid of it, then that we obviously know the Streisand effect could kick in. And that can be the right thing to do as well, deliberately and strategically ignoring the accusation. But it can also be framed as guilt or indifference to suffering. Or little Timmy died in one of your canoes. Can't you at least tell his mother that you're sorry for her loss? Well, of course we are. But like, you'll have your own general counsel, your own lawyer saying, well, there might be an investigation here. Like, we can't be seen to be admitting guilt. And then you've got, well, they're putting a question to you. Will someone think of the children? Well, of course you're sorry, but because it's not as simple as that, of course. Here's some to don'ts. Don't say no comment. Don't literally say the phrase no comment, because that in itself can be quoted. I can quote you saying you said no comment. And of course, everyone's saying no comment. It makes you look guilty. You'd be better off being unavailable for comment. And don't make oddly specific statements which beg more questions, like I have not cheated on my wife in the last 18 months. Allegations that I cheated on my wife in France are ludicrous. It's oddly specific and begs further questions. Okay, so it could happen to you. Don't make it worse. There's some mistakes that a lot of people make. But what should you be doing? What is the best practice? Well, let me tell you of one particular thing here about planning for the worst, about planning for outcomes that you don't want to see. So there's the moon and there's the Apollo program. Three of them went to the moon, one remained in orbit, and Buzz and Neil actually went to the surface of the moon. And there's Richard Nixon, who had some scripted remarks because he was the president then to welcome them back to planet Earth. And in fact, there you are. I'm the luckiest man in the world. Not I'm a president of the United States, but I speak for the whole planet here in welcoming you back. Welcome home, gentlemen. Fantastic, amazing speech. And everyone was excited. But it is reasonably foreseeable that they might have died. They could have died on the way there. They could have died on the moon. There could have been all problems getting off the moon, and therefore they would have just left on the moon to run out of oxygen and die. No one wanted that, of course, but what you don't want to be doing is paying tribute to people who could die and then have to do it like on the back foot in a hurry. You might miss something, and that's the point. Because here's years later, a TV address script came out that was published, and it was headlined "In the event of moon disaster," and I think this is one of the most beautiful things ever written. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon. These brave men, no hope for their recovery, but there's hope for mankind in their sacrifice, laying down their lives for mankind's most noble goal. They will be mourned by the people of the world. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. Man's search will not be denied. It's beautiful, beautiful language. No one wanted Nixon to read this, of course, but the key is, you're doing a disservice to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and the families and the NASA, the Apollo program, if you write something like this on the back foot, because they could have died. Hence why you ought to prepare for things like this, to have both speeches. Every political candidate that's serious has two speeches. Thank you. It's an honor to be elected president, and I'll do blah blah blah. And then they have the other one. I pay tribute to my opponent and wish them well. Blah blah blah. So the lesson is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Reasonable, foreseeable outcome. If you make canoes, then someone might die in one, and you ought to think about that rather than just assuming it won't happen. You don't want to hurriedly write that, and you don't want to miss the opportunity for nuance or sort of miss a point or forget to thank someone and so on. So yes, you should always write these things when things are calm and you're not reacting to something. Also, you should think, who is your enemy? Like, who are they? What do they want? What evidence might they have? So you have Watergate in America, and yeah, we had this word gate. We had Piggate here. There's our Prime Minister, because we added gate to all of our political scandals. There's David Cameron, who was Prime Minister at the time. And of course, the litmus test of whether it is a thing is that it's on Wikipedia. And bizarrely, in September 2015, the country in the UK, the only thing that people could speak about is, did our Prime Minister get involved in like a fraternity initiation ceremony when he was at Oxford University and have sex with a dead pig. It was made in a claim from one source in a biography of him, and it was clearly a lurid allegation that was designed to increase publicity for the book. But it got ridiculous, whereby for weeks and weeks, the only thing that people cared about is, did our Prime Minister have sex with a pig? And if you're the Prime Minister, like, you don't want to dignify this with an allegation. You don't want to it demeans the office, it demeans us as a country, and yet it just wouldn't go away. So after several weeks, the Prime Minister's spokesman said, "We are not going to dignify this allegation with a denial." So that's called a non-denial denial. It's not saying he did not do it, because we also know that can be mischievously spun and make the story even bigger. Prime Minister denies having sex with pig. Again, you don't want those types of headlines. So this is the least worst of dealing with it. It's called a non-denial denial. It can be very effective, but it can also backfire. When the Sunday newspapers found photos of David Beckham having an affair, his spokesman said the allegations were ludicrous. And again, to try and sort of give a flavour of a denial, but not saying that, because they had the pictures, they had him banged to rights. And again, I think that actually makes things worse, because everyone could see he was having an affair. So he'd have been better off saying, "I've made a mistake, I'm being blackmailed, I'm very sorry," whatever he's going to say, "I'm very, very sorry," etc. So, but also there's a reason to do a non-denial denial, is that we said, what evidence could they have? Could a rival have placed the story, and could he have evidence? So there is the Bullingdon Club, and there's our future Prime Minister David Cameron. And the challenge is, though, is that there is Boris Johnson, who had his eyes on the crown at that point. He wasn't yet Prime Minister, and there wasn't a vacancy. Now, Boris Johnson's team was saying, we're not behind these allegations, and we don't have any evidence. And that could be true. They might not be behind it, and they might not have any evidence, but it could also be the Machiavellian maneuverings of someone who was behind it and who did have the evidence and was trying to entrap Cameron into saying that he denied doing it because he had evidence that he did. And obviously, if these things are done in drink and people can't genuinely recall what happened, I've represented a lot of high-profile individuals who've have got either drunk because they've got an alcohol problem or they've blacked out. They think they might be drunk, but then someone's accused them of doing something and they have no memory of it. Um, and they think, well, I blacked out. I was in a cupboard, and someone says they were in a cupboard with me. Well, I can't remember. I don't think I would do that. So here's the thing: they didn't know, which is why you have to know your enemy. So people are often shocked at this bit of the presentation where they say, "Okay, you're suffering a reputational attack. What?" And you're saying there could be an upside. Yes, I am. There could be an upside to this. It can be an opportunity. Facing allegations is sort of now a bit commonplace. It doesn't have the kick that it used to have. The increase in the sheer number of them means that it's less impactful. It's still not particularly nice. Social media does give you an opportunity to bypass the journalists and so on. If you've got to owe someone or a group of people an apology, or if you want to explain it, you can do that to camera yourself and publish it on your own social media, and that then allows you to bypass people who might sort of do take clips or try to take it out of context or spin you and say he didn't actually directly address whatever. It allows you to be you and connect meaningfully, and people like to do that. It can also close down the discussion for good as well. So, for example, there might be rumours circulating for years that something untrue might have happened, and this is your opportunity for it's come out into the open. You've dealt with it in a positive way, and it gives you the opportunity to close down the discussion for good. Because again, if something's simmering underneath, then there's nothing to stop it. Whereas if it raises its ugly head and it's dealt with one way or the other, at least it's then dealt with, and you're not worried about it hanging over you. And opponents often make themselves look foolish, mistaken, vengeful. You'd be surprised how, for all the well-run campaigns there can be some spectacularly bad campaigns where they just look like horrible people who can't be believed, and then you don't really have to do anything because most people would look at your accuser and think, well, I don't believe them, so you don't want to do anything. Again, that's why doing something or not doing something, statement, not statement, it's all in the mix as to what the accusation is, who's making the accusation, etc., etc. You have to consider all of these things in their round. It can also be good PR. It's actually quite hard these days to cut through the noise and attract media attention. Um, Journalists have hundreds of messages, spammy press releases emailed to them all the time, and they just delete them all, or sometimes even ask to come off the database. Whereas this is at least the opportunity to shape the attention. Yes, ignoring it's not going to make it go away, but you do have the opportunity to show people that you're doing the right thing and be seen to be doing the right thing. So it can be a good opportunity. Most people will forgive an innocent mistake if people assume to be taking it seriously. I always say to clients, imagine you're the manager of a pizza restaurant. You're up in the office and you hear from some downstairs there's a family that's not particularly happy, so you're going to go down the stairs and talk to them. Now the first thing is they know you didn't cook the pizza, they know you didn't take the order. It's your pizza restaurant, so what can you do? You go up to them and you lead on empathy. You say, I'm dreadfully sorry, how are things? Talk to them, and then they don't expect you to know what went wrong, but they expect you to take it seriously, get to the bottom of it, make sure it doesn't happen again, and put it right. That's all any leader can do, is show that they take it seriously and they're respectful of everyone concerned. The mistake has happened, you're going to get to the bottom of it and make sure it doesn't happen again and try and put it right. That actually, most people dealing with a manager like that who feel that their complaints have been taken seriously then increase their regard for the brand, for your business, because you've had an opportunity to do the right thing and you did. Now, skeletons in the closet is another thing where I've had clients that have had things hanging over them for 20, 30 years and they've built a career always looking over their shoulder. Shakespeare said the thief doth, oh, misspell that, the thief doth fear every bush and officer. And the idea there is that if you have a guilty conscience, that the bush making a noise there could be a police officer. I'm sure the Golden State Killer thought after 30 years I might have got away with this. You can never be sure, and of course he didn't. And that's my point, is lots of people climb the ladder of their career where there's been a youthful indiscretion of some sort. They might have cheated in an exam or got a DUI or whatever it might be, where they've hoped it would never come out, and so far it hasn't. And the thing that they've not taken into consideration is that that of the sort of 10 people who sort of know the thing, one of them is going to be the person that then becomes the anti-fan, and it could be someone close to you, and then that's their killer, that's their smoking gun, isn't it? The fact that they know this, because then a journalist can put it to you directly and say, do you have a DUI from 20 years ago? Because at that point, you would, presumably they'd then have the certificate as well, to show that you have the conviction certificate. But that's my point, is you don't want to be lying about that point. I have that all the time where a client will lie to me. I'll say, look, if it's not true, then let's deny it. But this is our one opportunity to deal with this. If they have evidence that you did do this, then you have to cough to it now, because if you don't, it's going to be 50 times worse, because then they've got you in a lie. And in fact, that's one of the key lessons that I want to talk to you about, is mistakes that I've been made, is not being firm enough with the client. That client whose son ran over and killed a woman and some children, I they didn't I was on the board, I was advising the board, and there was 7 other people on the board that were sycophants and gave the man the wrong advice and told him what he wanted to hear. And he was crucified in the media because of it, because they saw it as, well, I'm one vote and they're 7. It's not about that. It's about mine was the right advice. And, they could have done a statement that just led with empathy, and, so, gave most of that to the poor woman that died, and also said, and my son's going through some serious things, and like any other good dad, I'm going to do my best to support him. They could have actually have done that the right way, that would have been faithful and fair to all, but they didn't want to do it that way. Missing the client's denial or cover up, as I mentioned earlier, there is. I always say to clients now, I don't take them at their word. I say, look, that's up to you, but I'll just say this as standard. If you are lying and there is evidence and you're in denial about that, then we're going to be in trouble if they then got it, because it's going to make it 50 times worse, and you are going to have to resign. And listening to Too Wide a Circle, polling hundreds of people. One of the problems that happens to people when they're accused of something or they find themselves under attack is they get inundated with friends and family and colleagues and people on LinkedIn who then offer them advice, well-meaning advice, but you can find you've got 50 messages from people saying, I do this, I do that, and they literally don't know what to do and are paralyzed by that analysis paralysis. So I've already mentioned the mistakes that clients make, denial, whether it be arrogance or misplaced faith and so on. But emotions, that gentleman there put out the wrong statement that significantly harmed his business, because he obviously wanted to be seen to support his son. He wanted his son to know he loved him, and that's fine. But that could have been in paragraph 4. So you'd be surprised how, it might not be you that's accused of something. It might be a loved one, or a colleague that is innocent. And again, they get you where you're weak. An incorrect assessment of media and or enemy motives. What do I mean by that? They say, well, look, I know all the dramatis personae, I know my accuser, I know the person that they're accusing of, I know they're innocent, and I know they're bit of this. And they think they've got all of the pieces of the jigsaw, and therefore they don't need someone like me. But they don't understand the way the media works. So they say, look, I read a newspaper, I watch CNN, and therefore I know how they work. They don't. So although they know that all the story, they don't know how a media organization is going to fit all that together. And they don't know, they're in denial about this person having an actual strategic campaign with stages. They think that it's in and out and done, and they don't realize that no, they're only at platform level 1, as it were. And they fall for tricks like, did you cheat on your wife? No. And then suddenly it's a front page, man denies cheating on wife, and they think, well, that's just mischief. And I'm thinking, yeah, but now everyone thinks you cheated on your wife, and you're gonna have to deny that. And the more you deny it, the more you look guilty. And there's a lot of people that are used to sort of always getting their own way, having never heard no. I always say, look, it's not a flowchart, it's 3D chess. There's a lot of variables here. And if you assume you know all of the pieces, you're already led into error. Donald Rumsfeld called it the known knowns, the known unknowns. And then there's the blind spots, the unknown unknowns, things you don't even know you don't know. That's why you need to take advice and soundings. How I can help? Well, preparation is prevention is the best cure. Risk audit and planning, identifying these blind spots, starting to come up with reasonable, foreseeable scenarios, how are you going to handle them, and so on. And we can also do 24/7 real-time media monitoring, so to stop these things building up momentum. If there's a petition to call for you to resign and it's launched on a Sunday night, you want that taken down on Tuesday when there's 100,000 signatures. It's a different order of magnitude 8 days later when it has 2 million signatures, and then you're asking for it to be taken down, because then the petition site has a reputational challenge there as to whether they're seen to be giving in to bullying lawyers. So, long story short, get it taken down on the Monday or the Tuesday, not on the Saturday when it's already got so big it's already sort of become a runaway train. Of course, most people ignore that and don't do that. I had one client who's a disgruntled member of staff stole their Rolodex because it wasn't password protected. So they literally spent, with every article and nasty thing they did, they then sent it to every single contact this person had, personal and private, and it was weaponized attempt to ruin their life. They never even thought, why is my Rolodex with all of my confidential contacts freely available to all staff? So most people, as I say, get to the point where it's a distress purchase. So that something's gone wrong, and that's where we can really kick in, offering crisis support, making it go away as best as possible, stopping stopping it from getting worse, and then sort of cleaning up what's there once everything's calmed down, whether that be removal of stuff from Wikipedia, search engine optimization, etc. I always say, look, take my number, call me if I can help. Now, if this was a presentation in real life, I would say any questions, but at that point, I would leave my contact details, mention my book. I'm always happy to send a PDF copy of my book for free. If you want to buy it, I'll get about 50 pence from Amazon. Thank you very much for your time.